From the Annenberg Media Center at USC, welcome to another episode of the Jazz and Tony Show. My co-host Jazz Kang, I'm Anthony Ciardelli. Today we are at our favorite time of the year. We like to call it Canadian Mardi Gras, the NHL playoffs, the start of the NHL playoffs. And Jazz and I are going to go over for you a bunch of the matchups, who we think who we think's going to win, who we think's going to lose, and why. So first things first, let's get down right to it. Who are you most excited to see? What matchup are you most excited to see this playoff season?
It pains me to say it, but the Bruins and Leafs, I think, is going to be. I mean, they're two original six teams, the only two original six teams to make the playoffs this year. So I think it'll be interesting to see the fan bases. They hate each other. You being a Bruins fan, I know the Bruins Leafs. I have family in Toronto. They hate the Bruins. Me, as an outsider, I hate both teams. But I also think it's going to be, I think that they're going to be going at it, and I think that in terms of the best hockey, I think that's where you're going to get in the first round there.
Absolutely. Two very skilled offenses, two great coaches. I think in terms of the Bruins, Bruce Cassidy has shown that he is an excellent coach. He's demonstrated
okay, let's go back to the beginning of the season when they were struggling. What were you saying about them then?
Not blaming Cassidy for their problems. I was blaming their defense. And because their young players really have stepped up on defense and offense, they've shown depth. They're one of the deepest teams in the NHL now. Obviously, Bruce Cassidy doesn't have as much experience as Mike Babcock. Babcock probably, I would say the Maple Leafs probably have the edge there. But the Bruins have the edge on defense and in goalie, which is, I mean, Tuukka Rask basically will determine this series, I think. The Bruins will live and die with Tuukka Rask. So far in his career, he's had an excellent goals against and save percentage in the playoffs. I think just over 2.1 goals against and like a 920 something save percentage. So it's been good. Last season he didn't do so great. That's part of the reason why the Bruins lost to Ottawa. But I think the series really hinges on Tuukka Rask.
Yeah, I also think the power play and penalty killing is going to be huge in this one. They're both top 5 power plays, so you don't want to be giving up too many penalties and giving the other team the man advantage. But I also think penalty killing, Boston is in the top 5, Toronto is not. And like you said, I really think it's going to come down to Freddie Anderson and Tuukka Rask. Toronto can score. I mean, they got the young guys, Mitch Marner, Willie Nylander, of course, Austin Matthews. But I think the Bruins cancel them out. You know, Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, David Pastrnak. You can go down that list. I think the Bruins are deeper, both on offense and on defense. I mean, you talked about it a little bit. They have Charlie McAvoy. They have Zdeno Chara. They have guys like Torrey Krug. Whereas on Toronto, who do you have? Morgan Riley? Roman Pollock? You know, I mean, I don't really think that Toronto matches up well with the Bruins. I think it's going to be a really, really, really tight series, though. I think it's going to come down to 6 or 7, and I would take the Bruins in 7.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same thing, Bruins in 7. One storyline, though, that will also probably determine the series is Brad Marchand's performance in the playoffs. Marchand really hasn't done well the last few playoffs. Obviously, 2011, you know the damage he did.
Yeah, why do we have to bring this up every single time?
Well, it just but I mean, that's the last time he's played well in the playoffs. He really hasn't played that well. So I'm going to agree with you. I think Bruins in 7, although I think it's going to be a great series of bloodbath. Next up, we're going to talk about the New Jersey Devils facing off against the Tampa Bay Lightning, the vaunted Tampa Bay Lightning, who've been first wire to wire. What do you think there?
This is the series I had the absolutely least interest in. New Jersey is just worse than Tampa in every aspect when you come to goals for, goals against, offense, defense, goaltending, coaching, weather, everything else. I'd rather be in Florida than in New Jersey. I am going to take Tampa Bay in a pretty easy win. I think the Bolts are going to take it in 4 or 5. You know, it's Keith Kincaid versus Andrei Vasilevsky. The good part for New Jersey, though, is they have Corey Schneider as a backup. He really struggled since he came back from injury, but he's an option there. And as we've seen in the playoffs, it's really all about goaltending. You know what I mean? If your goalie gets hot at the right time, so maybe the Devils can steal a game or two, but I think the Lightning are going to roll house in this one. What about you?
You know, I surprisingly think this is going to be a closer series than everyone expects. I think it'll go 6. I think it might go 7. I think the Lightning will win the end. But one thing that not a lot of people are talking about, the Devils won all 3 matchups against the Lightning this season. And the Lightning had their full roster pretty much. They had Stamkos and Kucherov during every single game. They didn't have McDonough, and McDonough never played against the Devils. But I really think this is going to be a closer matchup than people are expecting. Kincaid is a really good goalie. Vasilevsky is good as well, but I think that the Devils are motivated. Taylor Hall has been on absolute fire. I think he's got
first time in the playoffs too, man. And he's been around for almost over 10 years now, and he first chased of postseason hockey.
No, less than 10 years, like 7, 8 years. 2011 was his first, or 2010 he was drafted.
No, was it?
Yeah, same year as Tyler Seguin.
Oh yeah,
2010.
It was. Yeah. You're right. Okay. Well, either way, his teams have stunk, and I think his team's going to stink even worse in this one.
I think I have a hard time seeing Tampa lose in a 7-game series, but I think it's going to be closer than people expect. So I'm going Tampa in 7. The next one, I think the one we're both interested in seeing, Flyers and Penguins. Flyers and Penguins. This one next to the Bruins and Maple Leafs is going to be maybe even bloodier than Bruins and Maple Leafs, but maybe not quite more goonery, maybe some less overall skill. Although you have Crosby and Giroux and Malkin.
Yeah, I think it was 20. I think it was the 2012 playoffs. These two played that series. That it was the games were finishing 6-5, 7-5, and it was just back and forth. And the Flyers ended up winning. Obviously, with Pittsburgh being back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, going for 3. I think that might wear on them too, having to play this much hockey that many years in a row. But obviously, like what Phil Kessel had 92 points this year. That Crosby, I think, finished with 89. Malkin was right up there too. Philly has Jakub Voracek, as you mentioned, Claude Giroux. For some reason, even though Pittsburgh won all 4 games this year when they played, although a couple of them did go to overtime, I just feel like the Flyers are going to pull it off. It's going to be the goaltending is going to be the issue, though. They got Brian Elliott and Peter Mrazek, taking on Matt Murray. So I think that might be the downfall of the Flyers. But this series, I'm expecting it to be like back and forth. They're going at it, like you said, a lot of fighting, a lot of if a game turns into a blowout, I think you're going to see some brawls. But overall, I don't know why. But my hunch is just that the Flyers are going to win.
I think the Penguins are going to absolutely steamroll the Flyers. And I want to correct myself what I said before. When I said less skilled than the Bruins and Maple Leafs series, I did not mean to say that. I'm not stupid to say that Crosby and Malkin and Giroux and all those guys.
Well, you are stupid, but that's okay.
Well, yeah, I am dumb. I'm a little, I'm slow sometimes. What I meant to say is there's going to be more of a tendency towards violence, I think, in this series. But I think the Philadelphia goalie problems, which has existed since the days of Garth Snow and I mean after Garth Snow and Ron Hextall, I mean it's been almost 30 years, 25 years of Flyers' horrible goaltending, and they've been trying to fix that problem. But I know Brian Elliott, I believe, is just coming back from injury, and they have Neuwirth, they have Mrazek. None of them have played particularly well. The Penguins have the advantage with Murray. The Penguins won, I think, every matchup this season, put up 5 goals in every single game they played against the Flyers. And the Flyers aren't going to match them in scoring. I know they have Giroux, they've got some good guys, but they don't have Crosby, they don't have Malkin, they don't have Letang, they don't have the firepower that the Penguins have. So I really think it's going to be a short burst of entertainment. I think the Penguins are probably going to jump out to an early lead. They're going to dominate the beginning. The Flyers are going to goon it up, as they want to do, because it's Philadelphia. And I think it's going to go 5 games. I think it's going to go 5 or 6. Penguins, we'll say 6. I'll give the Flyers 2 wins.
All right, I'm taking the Flyers in 7 in that one. So I think that's going to be. I think that this and it's a toss up between what the best first round series is going to be in the East between this and the Leafs and Bruins.
Yeah, absolutely. And our final series in the East is going to be Capitals against Blue Jackets. What do you think there?
This is tough. You got Barry Trotz, the guy who can never make it past the first or second round in the playoffs.
Bruce Boudreau V2.
Yeah. That's why. You know what? Columbus played really, really well towards the stretch, the late end stretch of the season there. I think the series is all about the Capitals. It's like, okay, we've been waiting for years now. Okay, no, you know what? The Capitals are going to break through. They were stacked last year. They won the President's Trophy. Ended up getting bumped by the Penguins in round 2. It just depends on what you see. Alex Ovechkin has had a tendency to fold in the playoffs. I like Columbus's depth. I also think Washington, I've been saying, I think, for 4 or 5 years now that, you know what, the Capitals are going to break through. They're going to come through here. This, to me, is a toss-up. I'm going to take the Capitals in 7. I'm
going to take the Capitals as well. Don't confuse that with me thinking that the Capitals are going to get any further than the second round, because I think they get trounced in the second round. But I just can't bring myself to think that the Blue Jackets are going to beat the Capitals. I know they're always at least good for sometimes a first-round win, but I really think with Ovechkin playing the way he has been, he's been playing pretty well towards the end of the season. I know he tends to fold in the playoffs. Holtby can always steal a series when he plays well. I know the Bobrovsky can as well, but I just think the Capitals are going to take this first-round series. We'll call it 6 games. And move on to the second round, where they will promptly get steamrolled.
Yeah, well, that's what they've been known to do, so that's what we'll see there at that point.
And we're going to move on to the Western Conference. So first one we're going to touch on real quick is going to be Jets versus Wild. And I'm going to start off on this one. I'm going to call it the Bruce Boudreau effect. The Jets have been great. The Wild have Bruce Boudreau as coach. So Jets in round 1 pretty easily, I think convincingly, maybe in 5 games. Listen, I've talked about this before. Bruce Boudreau and everybody knows this, is not a good playoff coach. Wherever he's gone, the team has been pretty good during the regular season, oftentimes great, and then just fold in the playoffs.
Yep.
Capitals, the Ducks, now with the Wild last year. I mean, it's Boudreaux cannot win in the playoffs, and as we discussed in the previous, he's Barry Trotz 1.0 essentially. Barry Trotz.
Yeah, they're just like and they kind of look alike too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
they're
they've just
long lost brothers.
They've created this little path around the NHL of mediocrity and failure in the playoffs. So with the Jets, I know the Jets don't have a lot of playoff experience. They had one series in their entire, I think, franchise history. When the new franchise, the current franchise.
Yeah, well, Atlanta only made it once when they were the Thrashers. So this is technically the third time in franchise history that they're getting there. I think you hit the nail on the head. You know what? No Ryan Suter for the Wild. He's done. That's a big blow. Minnesota just kind of seemed like they were just a step up on Colorado, who we'll touch on in a bit, and St. Louis. That's the only reason why they got in, right? I think if you look at the Jets, though, they got Brian Little, Paul Stastny, Mark Scheifele down the middle. Obviously, you add to that Patrick Laine. Their defense, although they don't have a crazy number one guy, they're really deep as well.
Big Buff.
They got Bufflin. They got Tyler Myers. They got Jacob Trouba. So they're pretty stacked on the back end. Connor Hellebuck really made strides this year as the number one goalie, which was the Achilles heel of the Jets for the last 3-4 years. Why they couldn't, kind of get into the playoffs. I think the Jets win this one easily. That Winnipeg crowd is going to be nuts.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they'll show that here in the States because you guys don't seem to care that much about hockey. But I think that overall, you'll see. I think the Jets going to win this one in 4 or 5.
Yeah, same here. I think the Jets will probably win in 5. I mean, they really challenged Nashville for the top of the Western Conference. So I don't think the Jets are a joke. I think the Jets are really going to, when it comes down to it, really challenge to maybe even make the Stanley Cup Finals once it gets there.
Oh, yeah.
All right, and so we're going to talk next, going into, like we mentioned, Nashville Predators, Colorado Avalanche. I think this one's going to be another snoozer. I think Nashville is just going to dominate. I believe Colorado hasn't beaten Nashville in over 2 years, so they've got that going against them.
Yeah.
Obviously, Nathan MacKinnon has had a great season, but it's not going to be – it's Nathan MacKinnon versus Subban versus Arvidsson versus Yossi versus
you can go down the line. That Nashville team is stacked compared to Colorado.
President's Trophy winners against Pecorine and their backup goaltender Saros. They're just, I mean, there's a reason they're the heavy favorites to win the Stanley Cup. There's a reason they won the President's Trophy. So, bye-bye, Colorado.
You know what? It's a good run here for Colorado coming off of last year where they stank.
Yeah.
The Avalanche stank last season. Coming in now to this year, making the playoffs. Nathan MacKinnon made a huge step now. You know what I mean? He's a bona fide top 10 player, which I think people were waiting for him to, kind of capitalize on his potential. He's done that now. Good story for the Avalanche. A good year to build off of. But like you said, this one, I think, it has the most likely chances to be a sweep. I think Nashville's going to roll house on Colorado.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It really is a good story that has been overshadowed by the Golden Knights. I mean, if the Golden Knights hadn't been in the league, the Colorado probably would have been the underdog story of the year.
Well, one more thing to say as well. No Semyon Varlamov in this series. It's Jonathan Bernier. Jonathan Bernier versus Pekka Rinne. I think that just lowers Colorado's chances even more. So, I mean, this is the one series I'm probably going to avoid to even watch a second of, just because I have zero interest in this one. I think Nashville's going to be easily, and we both want to see Nashville-Winnipeg in the second round.
Absolutely. And speaking of the Las Vegas Golden Knights, we've got the Las Vegas Golden Knights facing off against the LA Kings. If you've watched previous episodes, you know that we've got a 6-pack of beer riding on this series. I'm going to reiterate what I said before. I think the Golden Knights are too fast for the Kings. I think they're a good front-running team, and the Kings have a tendency to fall behind to teams. And I really think that it's their season. I think that the Golden Knights, with William Karlsson's resurgence, the way James Neal has been playing, with Marc-Andre Fleury in net, I really think that it's probably gonna be a close series. Probably, I would say 6 or 7 games, because they've played a good season series so far. But I think the Golden Knights are gonna take it, especially just because if you look at the goalie matchup, Jonathan Quick is an excellent goaltender, but he hasn't had a great season. Fleury has had a pretty good season. He's been injury plagued a little bit, but I think they've got the advantage in goal. I think they've got the speed advantage. I think they've got the advantage on defense. So even though the Kings tend to compete well against the Golden Knights, I'm going to take the Golden Knights in 6.
Okay, I'm going to correct you on one thing. Jonathan Quick, the Kings gave up the least amount of goals in the regular season this year, so he must have had a decent year overall. He's only 32 years old.
Yeah, but
he had bad playoffs last year. This year, though, I think that if you look at the Golden Knights, it's been an awesome, wow, so cool to see a franchise or expansion franchise, make it to the playoffs, and not just squeak into the playoffs. I mean, they won the Pacific Division easily. It's been a great story. Obviously, they had the shooting there in Vegas, so that I think that's kind of played into the story as well. But ultimately, playoff time is big boy hockey. And I think the Los Angeles Kings personify that every time they get in there. High-end skill-wise, I'll take Anse Kopitar, Drew Doughty, and guys like Dustin Brown and Jeff Carter. You can go down the list of the Kings compared to, like you said, William Karlsson, and you have Jonathan Marchessault and James Neal. Fleury stank it up last time he was in the playoffs with the Penguins. I don't know if you remember that. There was a couple of series where that's why he got pulled.
That was true. I seem to remember him coming back when Murray got injured last playoffs and doing pretty well.
Yeah, and then he got sad again after that because he went back with Matt Murray. So you know what? I don't think that. I think the Kings have the advantage on defense. I think the Kings have the advantage in goal. I don't think this series is going to be close. I think the Kings are going to win. They're going to wrap it up in Game 6 at the Staples Center, where with the 4 games that they win, I think the Kings are going to win easily.
I totally disagree. We do have the six-pack riding on it. I'm curious, though. I mean, would you say that Jonathan Quick, when you think of goalies that have had excellent seasons this year, Jonathan Quick doesn't jump out in your mind? I mean, the Kings, I think, combined have had, as a team, have had good team defense. But I don't see Jonathan Quick this season, his performance, even being discussed in the Vezina Trophy conversation. I mean,
well, I think that happened in 2012 when they won the Cup. He came out of nowhere and he just shut it down. He did the same thing in 2014. They weren't heavily favored to win. You were like the 2012 obviously was just like whoa, they just came out of nowhere to win it. 2014, people were weary of them, like, oh yeah, don't forget about the Kings. And Jonathan Quick stepped it up in the playoffs. And I think this year the Kings have made some strides in terms of being a little bit more offensive. John Stevens has had them playing more of an up and down game, but I just think it comes down to experience. You know what I mean? For the Golden Knights, it's been a great story. It's been cool to see, but that ends now.
I disagree with you. The next series in the Western Conference is going to be the Ducks and Sharks, 2 teams I'm not particularly interested in. I know, obviously, they have got some big names between Couture, Thornton, Burns. And on the Ducks, they've got Getzlaf, they've got Perry, they've got Kessler, they've got Kessler. I mean, but it's just, for some reason, I'm not interested in this series at all. I think that the Sharks are going to win. I just think the Ducks have been kind of sputtering all season. They eventually did make the playoffs, but they were on the bubble for a long time. The Sharks were pretty much comfortably in for most of the season, I think. So really, this one's a toss-up. I'm going to take the Sharks in 7. What do you think?
I'm in the same boat as you. I mean, for one thing, Anaheim did have a lot of injuries this year. They were missing Getzlaf for periods, Kessler for periods, Corey Perry for periods. I'm in the same boat as you. It's going to come down to John Gibson against Martin Jones, who both might be good regular season goalies. Jones did have a good playoff when the Sharks made it to lose to the Penguins a couple of years back. But I'm in the same boat as you. I just think the Sharks have a little bit more firepower. They acquired Evander Kane. He's been looking really good since they got him. So I'm in the same boat as you. I think this is going to be one of those old school kind of style. The teams aren't going to be going up and down the ice. It's going to be hard hitting below the goal line. That's where things are going to get set up. I'll take the Sharks in 7 as well.
Yeah. So that will do it for our playoff roundup. For Jazz Kang, I'm Anthony Cherdelli. We'll see you in the next round. Interesting. And then what happened when they made the finals? They got smoked. Oh. We're going to start that again.